Hey everyone, this is Mauricio with Your Type, and this is another episode of the Your Type interviews. I'm an ENTP, and I'm talking to Hannah here, who is an INFJ. So without further ado, we'll kick off the questions. Hannah, what would be some like super high level general advice to your younger self? We'll start
To
there.
my younger self. Okay. Um, that's a hard one. I think I would say to loosen up. um, I was actually just talking with someone yesterday kind of about growing up and my experience as just like a very kind of anxious and shy kid. Um, and I felt really like I had to be perfect at everything that I did. Um, and that to me was kind of like, I don't know, just super anxiety provoking. And the thing that I've realized now is like, I could have just like let loose a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
and still been good at the things that I have kind of a natural inclination towards. Um,
hmm
So my example for this was like I did ballet as a kid. And then I also did several other extracurricular activities. Um, and I just remember being so stressed all the time. And like I didn't really enjoy any of these extracurricular activities because they were kind of just like another thing on my to do list that I felt like was work. Um,
hmm Why'd you
and
do
I,
them? Just
what?
why'd you do them?
I
Like,
did them because my parents wanted me to.
okay,
Um,
okay.
and also because I got like praised that I was good at them. So for example, I went to like a really good ballet school. And so these types of like kind of professional ballet schools really teach you from the time you're young to like be a really good ballerina basically. And but it's serious, and so their teaching style was very serious, and I was one of the best, if not the best, in my classes. And so then after I got to kind of a certain level, I think I was still pretty young. I think I was like maybe 10 or 12 when I stopped doing ballet. um
Mhm.
and I was still really good at it, but I just was like, I thought it was so exhausting and it was just weighing so much on like my stress level and my mind. And like, I was also really good at school. And so kind of putting those two things together, I don't know. And I just felt like I had to be very like perfect in every way and like perfect like socially and like all these different things. But I think it actually kind of tampered my actual personality um
Yeah.
because I was kind of like putting these restraints on myself, if that makes
hmm
sense. And I feel like
Was that?
only now. Oh, you go.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like only now am I kind of like getting to this point of like self-confidence or like being okay with like the level that I am trying now, to believe that like kind of what I'm doing now is good enough. And I'm
hmm
still kind of like working to get there, but yeah.
Was that like that whole feeling of perfectionism and almost like abandoning the self for what you think would have been important things to do? Like, was that just self-set and pretty innate to you, or was there some type of external pressure that you had to conform to in a sense? Like, did your parents really care that you were that way, or was it just you?
Yeah, I think it was both. Um, which like in psychology we kind of see that a lot. Um, kind of a natural inclination towards something, whether that's genetics or just kind of something in your personality. But
Yeah.
then also your environment shapes it. And so my parents did really have high kind of expectations for me. Um, and I don't think it was anything like out of the ordinary. Um, I think they just wanted me to try really hard at everything I did, and wanted me to be successful in kind of whatever I did choose to do well at. And
Mhm.
so um, they encouraged me to like kind of explore different areas, um, but also, wanted me to perform well at,
Mhm.
school and ballet and swimming and other things that I did.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Besides, so you mentioned like perfectionism and like anxiety growing up. What other things would you say also defined your experience growing up besides
Sure.
those two things?
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's kind of interesting because like that's not necessarily like a whole big part of personality. It's like a section that's kind of like that neuroticism
Yeah.
level. Um, let's see. I've always been kind of in the middle, personally on like extroversion. Um, I I am really drawn towards social situations and like towards people and learning about people. Um, for example, like if I don't interact with anybody all day, I will feel kind of just like weird and out of it and not connected. Um,
Sure.
and I really enjoy being around people. However, there's also this side of me that is more introverted, and I think I do lean in this direction more, which is like kind of being in my own head a little bit, like maybe a little bit less mindful, kind of uh, thinking a lot about like my interpretations of what's going on and kind of making connections to things in my head. Um,
Mhm.
kind of more this like introverted side.
Do you find it hard to shift out of that in a social situation or not really?
Um, I think so. Yeah, I think it's something that I have worked on a lot, especially
Mhm.
I'd say especially professionally, like in a professional domain at work,
Mhm.
because when I was a kid, going back to that, um, I was always like the shy kid, like the very quiet kid. I was always quiet, like especially in a school setting. I think because I felt a lot of stress there, um, I was kind of like just very in my head and very like wanting to be like perfect, and I thought that that meant like not bothering the teacher by talking, but then that kind of leaked over into like not participating in class and stuff. And
Mhm.
that particular component has really lasted for me. Like I've gotten feedback at my work somewhat recently that's like, "Hey Hannah, you have great ideas, like you should share them more." Um
Mhm.
and I gradually over the years have kind of been able to come out of my shell more. But I think that's hard for me because I do really live in my head, so sometimes it's hard to kind of externalize those thoughts or like
Mhm.
articulate those thoughts. But I've been practicing, so I think it's gotten better.
That makes sense. Yeah, I will say so. Hannah and I know each other, or have known each other for a while. And one of the things that I notice like socially, which maybe comes to an extent with like both being shy and in your head, but also having an interest in like the social realm and like social dynamics. Um, so from an outside perspective, I'd say that she's really good. Like I feel like you're really good at reading a room. So even if you're like not feeling like you're out of your head and you're not quote unquote performing well socially, like I feel like you're always kind of hyper aware of what's going on,
Yeah.
regardless of like how you're acting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I think that also kind of helps me in my job as a psychologist too, because there is this kind of like greater awareness, like zoom out sort of version about what's going on. Um,
Yeah,
I've also been described recently by one of my friends as like um, someone who really likes to be around people socially, but isn't always comfortable being the center of attention, which I really identify with. Because I often do, like, if I don't go to any kind of social event or hangout, I feel a lot of FOMO because I really enjoy like being in the mix of stuff and like kind of observing at least.
yeah,
And commenting on stuff when I want to, or asking questions. I also am a person who asks a lot of questions, I think like
for
more
sure.
than normal. Um,
Yeah,
but I'm not necessarily like the person who leads the conversation or who like is telling a really long, lengthy, or funny story or something like that.
yeah, yeah. I think you do really well socially, or I mean, you do really well socially in a lot of contexts, but um, and doing really well socially can mean, yeah, understanding social dynamics, being hyper aware. So you got that part down on lock, like pretty independently of anyone else. But the side that is you being more engaged, the situations that I've seen you at your best there probably have been like when you have like a pretty extroverted person, almost like leading the situation to where you're not anxious because you know that other people are kind of taken care of, um, and you can kind of just like enjoy and almost like engage.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think part of not being social or being so socially aware is like you can tell when people aren't having fun or like uncomfortable. But then part of being
Yeah.
introverted is like not feeling like you can do that all the time. So it's like a weird situation, I feel like.
Yeah, I have a great example of something along those lines too, actually, that just happened last weekend with a group of friends. Um,
Yeah.
and so this kind of is like an aspect of like that FE, so extroverted feeling, which I tend to um, kind of lean towards. And so it was like late at night, and this group of friends and I were deciding if we wanted to go get ice cream. And I'm a person who loves ice cream, so I'm always down to get ice cream. But we were trying to decide between Brahms or this local ice cream shop that I had been to before. Um, and the conversation was just like not really going anywhere. And because I felt really strongly that I wanted to go to this local place because I thought it was really good. I don't really personally care for Brahms ice cream. Um, but two of
It's
the other
fine.
people had been to Brahms and they were like, yeah, I like Brahms. So, anyways, that was kind of the situation that was happening. And then
Yeah.
one of the friends was like, okay, we need to decide where we're gonna go. And they could tell that I like really wanted to go to this local place, but I wasn't really saying anything. And I was like, well, I don't need ice cream even, like it's fine. But I didn't really want to like say I want to go to this local ice cream shop because I thought that the other people wanted to go to Brahms, and that like maybe it would be perceived as annoying if I wanted to go somewhere different than other people. And then no one else was really speaking up. So my friend literally had us do um, a blind test where we were supposed to close our eyes and then like raise our right hand if we wanted to go to Brahms and left hand if we wanted to go to the local place. Um,
That's funny.
and turns out only two people, and it was like a group of 5. I think only 2 people wanted to go to Brahms, and then the rest of us wanted to go to the local place. So I had that like strong kind of opinion that I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
go, but didn't really put it out there. And then my friend was like, basically told me that she thought it was like annoying that I wasn't kind of putting my opinion out there because I was like the only person that actually had a strong opinion. And then from my
Yeah.
side, I was like, well, I was just trying to make everyone else happy. So that was just something kind of funny that I feel like illustrates that pretty well.
Yeah, it does. And it is a recurring theme based on what you said earlier, right? Like earlier you mentioned like you had your school and ballet and all these things, and it was almost like in a way it was almost like the suppression of the self,
Mm-hmm.
um for like everything external and expectations and whatever, I feel like it's kind of like the same trait also, just like valuing the group more than the self in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
um I think it's funny that you said I don't need the ice cream when I know your ass really wanted ice cream.
I know, because I always do. And I was
No, that's
like,
so
I don't
sad.
know, like,
That's such a
because I
lie,
couldn't
dude.
tell.
The next question I wanted to ask is, without using any accolades, um, how would you describe yourself? I guess if you had to.
Hmm. Oh, wow, that is a big question.
Yeah, like no occupation, no achievements, nothing.
Hmm. Is it supposed to be that broad?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, hmm. I would say that, well, I've been described like interpersonally as very like a calm person to be around. Um, and I've been described as like sweet a lot. um, I think those are probably the two things kind of like interpersonally, um, kind of how I've been described. And then other than that, kind of like coming from inside my brain as me, I would say that I think pretty it's kind of like almost like a, I don't know, contrast, because I would say I think abstractly and logically at the same time. Um, or I don't know even if it's at the same time or kind of just in conjunction with each other in different situations. But when I'm making kind of an argument for something, I feel like I'm pretty logical. Um,
With that.
yeah, like for example, like um, I know you said not using accolades, but like just kind of applied like in my job, um, writing papers to argue for something. I think I can do a pretty good job at that. And like I almost joined the debate team in high school because I took the class and I was pretty good at that. And I enjoyed it. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of fun to me to argue points. Again, I didn't join that because I was shy and not confident in myself. Um, but yeah, I would say so. That's kind of like for the logical side. And then the abstract side, I think I use a lot of intuition also, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thinking um, almost like in an artistic way, if that makes sense. Like, I can't really describe how I link two things together a lot, but or kind of like zoom out and see a bigger picture, uh, see relationships or connections or kind of um, like tendencies of people to do certain things. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I do that a lot. Um, kind of like, yeah, make those like generalizations or summarize characteristics about people, or like observe things about people, or just like anything in general. I think I do that a lot, which again is good in my job as a therapist, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I kind of think in those types of ways. If we're talking about like how I think, yeah.
So it sounds like calm, sweet, artistic, intuitive, but also very logical about certain things.
Mhm.
I think it's interesting that you started off with like what other people would refer to you as, which is pretty I think it's pretty effy of you to do. Now
Also, kind of just to add on to that, I've also been described by multiple people as kind of like a, I don't know, like a leader, and someone with strength, or like strong, like I don't know, convictions, or leadership qualities. I don't know, but also someone who is able to stand back. I think coming more into that like shyness and kind of observing quality. But I have noticed that like if I feel really strongly about something, or I feel like the position needs to be filled, then I can kind of jump into more of that like confident leader position.
yeah, like you don't, I feel like some people have that need
Yeah.
like to always be the person in charge, but it's more situational for you, like if no one else is doing a good job
Mhm.
with it. Yeah, I think also the fact that you're really tall helps with that, honestly.
Yeah. The physical
For the
presence.
viewers,
Yeah.
yeah, for the viewers, she's like 6'8", so uh, no, what are you, 5'10"?
Yeah. I've done.
Yeah, 5'10". That's right. Yeah, no, I mean it helps. It totally helps. And it's funny, like when you're like leading, when I've seen you like with other women, I guess, and you're like leading them, it's funny because they're just kind of like looking up at you. Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of funny, a funny scene. Cool. And then kind of going off of your descriptors, what do you think is a part of that, or maybe even something that you didn't describe that you really like about yourself, that you think are some of your best qualities that you really respect about yourself,
Mm.
besides your stature?
Oh, that's hard. I would say kind of two things that I like about myself are like my ability to kind of want to see people for the genuine side of themselves that they are. Um,
Yeah.
I think that is kind of what I'm most like attracted to social settings about, is kind of like really trying to learn about people, and like see their good qualities, which again, tying back to my job, because that is a large part of my life, like I work with um patients who are in a lot of people's eyes kind of difficult to like, um and kind of funnily enough, those are like some of the people that I like they're my favorite patients. And I think because I can kind of see past maybe what other people can't see past, um, to kind of see where they're coming from, or like want to provide them that insight that might make other people like them a little bit more. And
Mhm.
I kind of feel like I have this ability to like them for who they are, and kind of see past like the bad stuff maybe. um I feel like I can do that quite a bit. while also recognizing that like people's behavior can be bad and then not want to like involve myself with them to protect myself, like that sort of thing, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think just like my ability to kind of get to know people, I guess. And then
And like see beneath the surface, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah, I think so. And I don't know, I would say I like the way my brain works. um in that way that I was kind of describing before, like being able to zoom out and summarize or make links or relationships between things that other
Mhm.
people may not um, see in the first place. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of intuition.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like you come to answers quickly.
Yeah, I do.
Um, and they're usually right. And I think people usually get there, but it takes more time for some people to
I
get there.
agree. And that can actually also be a bad thing, too, I've noticed,
Sure.
because it's hard for me lots of times to articulate what I mean in my head and kind of like
Yeah.
figure out or explain the processes that I got from A to B with, like how I got there, because I'm not really sure how I got there in the first place. I just know that I did. And so sometimes that can be hard to like communicate to other people, um,
Mhm.
or kind of lead others along to the links that I just made.
Mhm. Yeah, and I feel like sometimes people like it if the speed is so different, then it almost sounds like you're saying something ridiculous
Yeah.
and like completely out of pocket.
Yeah. And that
You
happens.
know?
Um, and
Yeah.
a lot of people, I think, sometimes like don't take me seriously. And I do kind of have like a dumb blonde ditzy personality, which is part of my personality for sure. But I think also part of it is because I will say out of pocket things, um, just because they kind of
Mhm.
pop into my mind, but I'm not expressing the words of like thoughts that led me to that point, which I think can
Mhm.
come across as like odd sometimes.
Yeah.
I see this kind of as a strength and also a drawback in my job as well. Because a lot of what we do is like spend a long time kind of in this assessment phase of trying to
Yeah.
determine, what symptoms someone is presenting with, and then eventually kind of how to label their diagnosis for a mental disorder, and then choosing like which therapeutic method would work best for them considering all of the factors in their life and everything. Um, and I typically have most trouble with that assessment phase because uh, I've been given feedback that I kind of like, need to ask more questions about what is going on and gain more kind of detailed information about different aspects of this person's life, with which I agree with, because it's important. However, I usually get kind of the basics and then jump to a conclusion, or maybe not a conclusion, but like a kind of a hypothesis or idea about what's going on, and kind of move too quickly into
Mhm.
like diagnosis and like thinking about what method would be used to treat them with. And usually like I do stick with the same diagnosis, the same treatment, um which I mean makes it easier for me, but also I kind of neglect to look at all of those other factors at play, and like I could be wrong sometimes, so
Mhm.
that's something else.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes people need to like the negative side of that is that people need to feel heard
Hmm.
sometimes. So it's like even if you give them the right answer, if you do it too quickly, they feel like you're
Yeah,
wrong.
totally.
Um, because they just don't feel like they shared enough for you to know,
Mm-hmm.
and or they don't share enough for them to trust you, right? So like, because I do think the longer people divulge information to you, the more that they trust you.
Yeah.
On that note, what are some of your least favorite things about yourself?
Least favorite things. Um, I would say going back to that kind of deficit that I feel like I have in terms of like articulating what is in my brain. I think that happens like every day. And yeah, I'm not sure what to do about it besides just like practicing or like getting feedback from people saying that doesn't make sense. Um, and that kind of helps me like stop and be like, oh, okay, I jumped to a conclusion here. I jumped too far ahead of like people haven't been able to follow along with my thoughts. Um, so I'd say that's one thing because that kind of hinders my communication with others, I think. Um,
How do you even practice that besides people telling you it doesn't make sense? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's hard because I mean, I think just practicing like talking and communicating and explaining things to people just in
sure.
general, like getting older, practice like having life experience. But there are people who I have like specifically told that to, or like in a work setting, have given me feedback like that doesn't make sense. And so that kind of I think helps like maybe highlight instances where I do it more. But oftentimes people will, just kind of like in social interactions, just kind of like I've noticed like maybe subtly just kind of like stare at me or like go to a different subject. And I think maybe that is like an indication that they didn't really get what I was saying, but didn't really say anything about it. Um, so yeah, I would say that is something that maybe like I don't like as much and I would like to work on. And probably another thing is just like my high level of like neuroticism. um,
Sure.
I think because I'm a very idealistic person. And so those ideals and the way that things should be kind of gets in the way of um, realizing that reality is reality and um, there are other like contextual factors at play um, that don't allow me to perform as well as I should or allow others to perform as well as they should or just like things don't really happen the way that I think they should because like it just doesn't work that way. um so
Yeah, I think you fall into something I fall into as well, which happens to a lot of dominant or auxiliary, especially dominant intuitives, which is you kind of fall in love with the vision.
yeah.
Um, and so when something doesn't match the vision, then it's bad. Like it's not right. It's not how it's supposed to be. Um, Even though there's really not necessarily, sometimes there's a good reason why it has to be that way, but sometimes there's not, and it's just because that's how I envisioned it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I think that happens a lot to me as well. Like you always compare reality to your vision for something.
Yeah, definitely.
Again, kind of building off of that question, so it's hard sometimes to communicate hunches or like describe them in a way that makes sense to other people because it comes across more like a knowing. Um, would you say that's your biggest blind spot, or do you think that there's something else that you also notice, or in addition to that, that is your biggest blind spot?
Well, it's kind of hard to know what your biggest blind spot is, right?
I mean, if you're self-aware, I think you know what situations get you in trouble a lot.
Yeah, I would
Um,
think that Jung would say uh, that it is oftentimes in your unconscious and is kind of hard to see maybe
yeah,
until like late in life. Um, just kind of coming from my nerdy young knowledge. But
yeah, I can reframe it like what is something that besides the one that we were just talking about, um, what are character or traits about you or the way that you work that bite you in the butt?
hmm,
Because it may, yeah, I agree. Like it may be unconscious, but there's definitely patterns of like this is a recurring issue for me.
yeah, I would say
Um,
it would probably be similar to those things that I don't like about myself. I think it would
mhm,
probably be those again. Um, because I
mhm,
think when I'm thinking about like the things that bother me the most, I think some of those things are like social conflicts,
yeah.
whether they're big or small. I think they all really bother me. And I think usually it's because of miscommunication. Like, I think that happens a lot just in general social conflicts. But I think to me, it bothers me because I feel like I wasn't communicating fully, like how I was thinking about this process. And so it didn't really like I think if I like offend people or whatever, it's because it like I didn't fully explain what I meant by something. Um
Mhm,
and so just kind of putting it in like a not very descriptive or like not really explaining what I meant behind that can come across in a certain way to someone else. And then
yeah.
uh yeah, if it becomes an issue, I'm like, no, like I didn't mean that. Like um so yeah, that can kind of bite me in the butt, I would say, like that issue of not really fully explaining what I mean, or how I got to a certain conclusion. Uh,
Mhm.
and then what was the other thing I said? Oh, the neuroticism thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's right.
oh yeah, I would say that that is also a blind spot for me, the neuroticism component of my personality, because um,
Mhm,
I think that I have very kind of like rigid beliefs about what is like right and wrong. Um, and so I think when someone else has like either a different belief about that or like just a different interpretation of that, and that comes through in their actions. Um, for example, I'm thinking like, finances, like money wise, like how someone should deal with that or something. Like if it doesn't really fall in line with how I think it should be done, it like really bothers me. Um
mhm,
so again, kind of like socially that is a little bit hard sometimes, to kind of relax and be like, no, like this is just my interpretation. That doesn't mean it's necessarily correct. Because sometimes I
mhm.
have a very strong, like, value judgment on the way that things should be done and kind of have trouble seeing another point of view on that. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I mean, I think that also ties into the desire to like plan things out and like make sure everything's organized and structured and things. It's like
Yeah.
it's all in protection of the neuroticism thing in a
Yeah. And I
sense.
mean, you can look at it like different ways psychologically. Like, yeah, you can look at it like higher in that neuroticism on like the big five traits, or through the Jungian functions, like I am very strongly on the dimension of the J, the judging function. And so I think that kind of comes through in that. Um, in
Hmm.
that I have like a strong belief that things should be a certain way.
Hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. Um, okay, and this kind of was a question that I brought up earlier, but it's more tactical, I guess. When I asked like the advice question to your younger self, but this one is, what advice would you give to a younger INFJ about how to develop?
Ooh.
So like tactical things they can do to get better
Okay.
in the ways that you have.
Well, that is operating under the assumption that I am like a perfect version of myself. Uh,
I wouldn't say that, but I feel like you've gotten better
yeah. I mean, hopefully,
than you used
as
to be.
we age, right? Uh,
Yeah, no, you definitely have.
yeah.
We've all got work to do, but like
Yeah.
you've definitely changed in a positive way.
Sure. Um, well, thank you. um, advice.
For all the aspiring INFJs out there.
Um, I would say that it's not kind of following off of this like judging function sort of piece. I would say that it's not wrong to stand by your beliefs and your values and kind of judgments because I think there is value in that for sure.
No, definitely.
Yeah, and I can think about, various situations over my life where I kind of questioned like should I just go along with like, how other people are doing things or maybe like I'm thinking about this very like specific kind of like bullying situation that happened um when we were
Tell us
far
more.
too old. We were in college. Um
Wait, what?
this is when I was in Rwanda.
Okay,
Do you
okay.
remember
You
that?
got bullied in Rwanda.
Huh?
I remember you going to Rwanda, yeah, but I did you get bullied
Yes,
there?
dude. The people I was
What?
living with. Um
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
I was like
That's
bad. I was like, are we actually bullying me in college? Like
wait, what
they
happened?
were just like they ganged up on me and they were gossiping about me like hardcore. It was most
Why?
of the other women that were like in the house that we were living in. They were all
That sucked.
from America, of course.
Why? Like
I
what?
don't know, dude. They were just being like mean. Like mean as if you were in elementary school.
Yeah, for sure.
Like just being
That
like
sounds like
straight
it.
up rude and like exclusionary and like it was crazy. I was like, am I going crazy? And then I was like friends with these other two people in the house and I was like, what is going on? And they were like, I don't know, they're acting crazy and like this one girl, she was like, I'm in a sorority, like I get how it is and like they're being like really annoying. And I was like, yeah, they are.
That's so
It
weird.
was very odd. Yeah, it's a thing that happens.
So yes, just basically like stick and value your own convictions.
Yeah, I would think
Um,
so. I would say so. And I think because I do have a tendency to like be a people pleaser, like go along with what other people think and also have that kind of like shy aspect to my personality, I kind of have throughout my life kind of like walked this line of like do I want to speak up and like say what I really think and feel in this situation and kind of take what feels like a risk or do I want to like have everything go smoothly, and like it doesn't really matter what I think in this situation, or maybe I shouldn't speak up. And I'm learning now that like what I have to say and like my thoughts really are valuable, and that I should speak up. Um, Pretty
Hmm.
much in like every situation, whereas like in the past I haven't as much. And things often go well when I do speak up and say what I think is correct. So um,
Hmm.
that is a piece of advice I would give.
Yeah. So more like if you have those moments, if you're an INFJ and you have those moments where you feel like you're taking a risk by saying your thoughts or your opinion, to just lean into the risk,
Mhm.
essentially, as opposed to running away from it.
Yeah, and I think that could be ascribed to a lot of people in general. I
Hmm.
mean, I think there are some people out there that are very um, don't really care what other people think about them, or just very like say what they think, or like that sort of thing. But I think it's pretty wide ranging, but especially for someone like me, who kind of has that like second guessing slash, it's just like a conflict between strong beliefs and people pleasing tendencies, like
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also think that if you use a lot of FE, like you do value like harmony, you do
Hmm.
value people getting along, people being happy. So yeah, sometimes saying the opinion can potentially stir the pot, and I think that's uncomfortable
Hmm.
sometimes, especially for IFE
Oh,
users.
for sure. And I think
Um,
I use it so much, also thinking about kind of like my younger self, to where I've literally kind of been in situations where I've used so much FE that I'm like, there's no, like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, because thinking about when I like needed like medical help or something, like which just happened, like I'm like, oh no, like I don't want to make it about me, this is so embarrassing, like I'll just
even
handle
though
it.
like it should be about you,
What?
even though it should be about you because you're like dying.
Yeah, no, really, it doesn't make any sense, and I'm like, I can handle it, like I can do it myself, but it's like, no, like others care about you and like want you to be okay. But I just have this
Right.
belief that that would be like disruptive or like embarrassing, or like say something bad about me, if I was to
Hmm.
ask for help, or like show that I was weak in some kind of way. Uh, so that is kind of another piece of advice, is like say your opinions, but also like ask for help when you need it, or like show your flaws, sort of thing.
That's all the questions I've got. Um, so thank you for joining. Really appreciate you being here and answering all that.
Nice. Yeah. It was kind of fun to like think about all these things. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel like you're usually the one asking questions.
Yes. Conceptualizing
So
somebody
it's
else, not myself.
not yourself. Yeah. No, but I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.